Hi everyone, welcome to our presentation. If you chose to watch this presentation, I guess you must be quite interested in home language maintenance. So you may notice that many immigrant children in countries like Australia are struggling with speaking their home languages or in general maintaining their home languages, while some others are quite good at their home language. So what is the reason and why some children can maintain their home languages so well? Our presentation today, we have to answer this question. So the topic of the presentation is consistent and persistent parents' policies for successful home language maintenance. So this study is part of my PhD study on home language maintenance among Vietnamese Australian family. And my study is within a research called the Speech Project, funded by the Australian Research Council Discovery Grant awarded to Professor Sharynne McLeod and Dr. Sarah Verdon on Vietnamese Australian children's language competence. So before we look at our study, I would like to present you some facts about the Vietnamese community in Australia. According to the 2021 census, Vietnamese is now among the top 4 languages after English, Mandarin, and Arabic. And the Vietnamese community in Australia is now in their 2nd and 3rd generation. And research on home language maintenance shows that there's a risk of language loss in the 3rd generation. Now, we all know that home language maintenance has a lot of benefits like the cultural, social, academic, economic, and cognitive advantages. But many immigrant families do not know how to help their children maintain their home languages. So you can see that immigrant children risk losing their mother tongue when starting school if the families do not have good plans and support for them. One of our previous studies shows Vietnamese Australian children's language proficiency. And as you can see from this chart, the children's English proficiency above average is quite good, 94% for the oral skills, that means the speaking and the listening, while for the written, for English, it is 85% above average. And for Vietnamese, the percentage of above average proficiency is a bit lower for speaking and listening, but it's very much lower for the written skill, which is the writing and reading. Only 41% of the children are reported to have proficiency above the average level. And this is the parent self-report. In one of our studies, we also found that the Vietnamese Australian children's Vietnamese proficiency is associated with their language use. That means the more they use the language, the better they become, or vice versa. The better they are at the language, the more they want to use the language. And also, Vietnamese Australian children's Vietnamese proficiency in use is associated with their parents' language use and their parents' perceptions of the importance of home language maintenance. At the same time, their English proficiency is associated with very different factors, which are parents' income, parents' partner's age, and number of children. In one of our previous studies, we also found that 2/3 of the families had family language policy, and among these families, 2/3 of them consistently enforced their language policy. So I'm going to present the results of this study, which is now in press in a publication called Consistent and Persistent Successful Home Language Maintenance Among Vietnamese Australian Families. First, I would like to talk about the theoretical framework, which is Spolsky's language policy theory. According to Spolsky, language policy has 3 main components, which are language practice, language ideologies, and language management. Language practice relates to the use of the language among the family members, while language ideology refer to the desire to use or not to use a language in the family. And language management is about the actions, the practices, the plan to maintain, to use a language in the family. These three components are actually interrelated, as language practice is affected by the language ideologies, because like if you want to use the language or you want to keep the language, you will use it more. And also language ideologies also impact language management. That means when you are interested in keeping a language or using a language, you will think of the policies or the practices or the strategies to maintain that language. So the aim of this study is to explore Vietnamese Australian families' experience of successful home language maintenance in terms of language practices, language ideologies, and language management. 7 parents from 5 families whose children achieved high bilingual proficiency scores in the speech and language assessment of the speech research program were invited to participate in a focus group. And this discussion was guided by a set of questions about home language maintenance, covering topics like the reasons why the family wanted to maintain the home languages and what are the difficulties they had when they maintained their home language and what they did, what type of practice or strategies they had to help their children maintain the home language, and also what recommendations they had to improve the situation of home language maintenance in Australia. So this discussion of 2 hours were transcribed and translated into English by me, who is also a NATI accredited translator. And then the thematic analysis of the bilingual transcription in NVivo was conducted and checked by all the authors. And we also sent the summary of the analysis to the families, to the parents, for them to check. So we discovered 4 key themes in the discussion. The first one is about the motivation for maintaining home language. The second is about the challenges in home language maintenance. And the third one is the family's practices and strategies for successful home language maintenance. And last is their recommendations for support from the government. First, we look at the parents' motivation for home language maintenance. What are the parents' motivations? The main reasons why the parents wanted the children to maintain home languages, to maintain home language are communication with grandparents and relatives, maintenance of cultural identity, parents need to speak their home language, and the belief in the cognitive and emotional benefits. So one of the parents said, I think what really matters is their identity. I know they will grow up with the influence of Australian culture, but I believe there will be a time when they ask themselves where they belong to. I think if they can speak Vietnamese, they will understand part of their identity is Vietnamese, which helps them to feel they have a firm root. That's why I think I want to preserve the language for them, for that helps them understand they are Vietnamese. The parents also expressed the difficulties when they wanted to maintain the home language for their children. So these include children starting school and growing older, parents' lack of time and persistence, insufficient support in terms of formal Vietnamese education, and some other difficulties about education, resources, and the teacher quality. So in terms of the reasons and the difficulty related to the fact that children start school and grow older and don't want to maintain home language, one of the parents said, when they get to high school, they also have other languages to learn. Now we also need to think of what is more important in life. At school, the subjects are compulsory. They also need to learn those stuff to compete in their future work. They will have to choose between family, the home language, and the other stuff. So everyone has only 8 hours we have to allocate it properly. So time is a child's time, not only parents' time. But the parents were successful in maintaining the home language for their children. And these are what they did, and these are the reasons why they were successful. The first thing they did is, the first strategy is speaking Vietnamese all the time and keeping strict family language policy. Also, they taught their children Vietnamese either directly by using textbook or indirectly through regular activities, including book reading, daily interactions, and watching Vietnamese TV. And the last strategy is being consistent and persistent. So one of the parents said, as for my family, since the children were small, we have been keeping a rule that if our child finds it hard to say a sentence in English, we accept his English sentence, but then he would have to say that in Vietnamese again. So my son knows that. So since small, he is always aware if he wants to tell his school stories in English, he would have to tell in Vietnamese as well. So he would switch back to Vietnamese right away. So apart from sharing the practices and the strategy for successful home language maintenance, the families also were very strong about their recommendations, suggestions for better policy of home language maintenance in Australia. They recommended some changes in the language education policy and advocacy, like better access to formal Vietnamese education outside Bankstown or Cabramatta areas, and also better resources like Vietnamese language textbooks, bilingual books, and education information. And also they wanted to raise public awareness of the importance of home language maintenance. So this is one of the parents saying, it's important to raise the awareness of language learning, of the importance of mother tongue maintenance. That is the key thing. Once we can solve that, other problems will be solved. It's important to change perceptions. Our research has a lot of implications. First, the implications for children and families. Successful home language maintenance requires consistent and persistent efforts. And we also have implications for practitioners. You can advise and encourage multilingual parents to consistently and persistently use their home language with their children. Last but not least, I would like to talk about the translation of the study, because this study is about home language maintenance among Vietnamese Australian families, successful experience of the families in maintaining home language. So after I completed my research, I have been hosting a program on SBS radio called Maintaining Vietnamese Together. I have been producing nearly 50 episodes since October 2021. This program is aimed to raise awareness of maintaining home language, maintaining Vietnamese, and also to inspire family in the process of home language maintenance, and to show like models of families with success in home language maintenance. Thank you very much for watching this presentation. If you have any questions, please contact us with our email address on our presentation.